All right, everyone. We are back with the Built with vLayer series. And I got a great guest today with an awesome company and project that vLayer has been partnering up with. Arpan, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Scott. How are you?
Not too bad. Weather's getting a little hot. So, summertime is here and everyone gets excited about that. A little vitamin D in the air could be good for us, right?
There we go. There we go.
Love
Can't
it.
complain, man.
No complaint. Well, I'm excited to kind of get into this conversation. I mean, the project that you're doing, it's very unique. It's interesting, especially in light of all the news around stablecoins getting a little bit more attention with Circle and whatnot. I think it's been a great thing. But before we kind of dive in all that, we'd love to kind of just get a little bit more background about yourself. And a question I like to ask all my guests is, what got you into blockchain? What was that journey look like? And kind of give us a little bit of a breakdown.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm sure I'll probably be the most boring of those stories, given all of your guests, but I'll try to keep it quick. Spent about the first half of my career, as a lot of people in the space do, in sort of the TradFi industry. Started off at management consulting firm called McKinsey, spent a little bit of time at investment bank called Goldman. I was playing the partner role when I was at McKinsey in London when I decided I didn't want to be an advisor for the rest of my career. So left McKinsey, built a digital bank in the UK, which was going really well until COVID, when it wasn't. At that point, we kind of wound down the operations, and I kind of thought about what I wanted to do with the next chapter of my career. And I really asked myself three questions, right? So one, what am I good at? Two, what do I like to do? And three, what do I think will change the world? And I think as kind of I rank ordered all of my different answers, blockchain and crypto was at the very top of that list. So that's how I got into crypto. Fortunately, a friend of mine had started and built a really interesting crypto prop trading firm, which kind of was on its ascent at that point. So he asked me to help him sort of join and scale that business, and we scaled that to being one of the largest crypto trading firms in the world. But prop trading, again, is very kind of isolated, right? You kind of just focus on what you're doing. And I wanted, again, part of the reason I joined blockchain was to kind of, as I said, try to help move the conversation forward. So a capital markets business of that to help other crypto projects deal with the very, very nebulous capital markets in Web3, and incubated Noon Capital, a yield-bearing stablecoin out of that. So, and here we are today.
There you are today. So you've been in the game for a long time, and I think you and I have been in the space quite a bit too. And we've seen a lot of ups and downs, especially with the given notion that crypto has its negative connotations that are attached to it. I'm sure when people find out you're in the crypto world, they just kind of put you in a separate category, which might be a bit unfair. How do you, I guess, from your perspective, what are you looking at with Noon Capital? Like, I want to get into what Noon Capital is, but really, let's start with what is Noon Capital solving in terms of the perception of what crypto really is and what Web3 is about, and really what we tend to see with the legacy media, how it kind of paints this negative story about blockchain and crypto being more or less a fad, scams, meme coins, nonsense, things of that nature.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? So let's I think there's a couple of different interesting things to explore there. So first, I think you are right. A lot of the attention that media pays to crypto is probably because there's a lot of things out there in crypto that, while they may be very successful and capture a lot of sort of attention in crypto, may not have the most longevity or have found kind of the best long-term product market fit, right? And there haven't been that many real crypto-centric use cases that have also real-world implications, right? For our parents and our grandparents and things like that, right? It's like the early adopter curve. We're still very, very sort of early in that process, and to hit true mainstream adoption is still probably some time away, some product cycles away, and frankly, probably some products away. So I think that's probably the answer to your first question in terms of why the perception of the industry still lags, I'd say, a little bit. And the answer to your second question is a really interesting one, because we built Noon exactly to counter that, right? And yeah, not to, I guess, sort of aim this directly towards the answer of your question, but I think it actually fits in really nicely. Again, I think that I came into this industry to try to move the conversation forward, and that conversation is a global one. It's not just sort of for the few of us who are luckily and privileged enough to have stumbled upon crypto early enough in kind of our careers, or early enough in its life cycle to now understand it really well. I think that in order for crypto to really break through, we need to have real world use cases. And I think one of those is yield bearing stablecoins, right? And I think the real importance of that conversation is where we try to shift the narrative of our reserve currency for most of history, right? The history of capitalism has been a fiat-based, non-inflationary reserve currency, right? And be it again, gold, dollar, etc., right? Now, the issue with that is that in times of inflation, if there is a disconnect between different people in society and their access to a yield bearing or a non-yield bearing asset can make a massive difference to them in terms of how their income grows, in terms of what they have access to, et cetera, over a few decades, right? And I think that's what you're seeing right now, that today, a very small portion of the world, but a very powerful and wealthy portion of the world, like large companies, large high net worth individuals, have access to liquid yield-bearing assets, which means that they can, one, generate yield passively on these assets, but at the same time, use them liquidly, use them as collateral, right? Think, for example, of Elon Musk putting up his Tesla shares as collateral for a loan to buy Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing companies can do, high net worth individuals can do, you or I can't do, right? And that is, I think, symptomatic of a system that allows kind of the rich, the wealthy, the powerful to sort of continue. Right? Now, the central thesis of Noon is we want to get a yield-bearing stablecoin in every person's pocket around the world. So that means that you or I now suddenly have access, again, maybe not to the same kind of, putting stocks up as collateral, et cetera, like Elon can. But if we can have access to something that emulates that, suddenly that wealth disparity stops growing and may either stay constant or even start shrinking, right? And I think that's the real power of a yield-bearing stablecoin. And that's, I think, the real benefit that Web3 and crypto can give the real world. Again, just one of the real benefits, I guess, that we're targeting.
Yeah, what's really nice about this is that this isn't a design to create this kind of crazy amounts of 10, 100x that you might hear when you talk about stable coins or investments or within crypto. You're looking at this from a generational, like world, global perspective, where you're giving people access that they didn't have access before, whether it's passive income, liquidity, instead of it keeping at this kind of top tier, the wealthy, right? They'd be 1%ers or however you want to call it. I think it really goes to say that this is where the technology becomes very powerful. We're not just going for a quick turnaround where people can make their bag and move on. I think this is something that you're looking at for everyone that can participate. And I love about that. I think that really kind of opens up the idea. What is the technology capable of? Well, here's a great example. New Capital is actually doing a wonderful job of looking beyond just the interim, which typically we get kind of lost in our crypto bubble, where we're just looking at the next 2-3 weeks ahead of what's the next big fad, that will give me the big ROI, so really, really appreciate that. I guess there's a lot of verification solutions out there. I think zero knowledge proofs, obviously, it's been around a long time. A lot of people think ZKPs are just a crypto thing. It's not really the case. It's, it's been certainly amplified, but it's been in Web 2, you can say, for a bit too. But within all the verification solutions, I want to get into this partnership. What made you choose vLayer? And kind of, I guess you can go from there, the ducktail into what is the relationship about with what vLayer and New Capital are trying to solve? Yeah,
so part of what's really important, right? If we step back for a second, part of what's really important about yield-bearing stablecoins is that you need to be able to demonstrate how you need to provably demonstrate that you're generating the yield that you claim to be demonstrating, or that you claim to be reporting, right?
Right.
And lots of different people have tackled this in different ways. Oftentimes it's through some sort of self-reporting, even in, frankly, the public markets, right? When you have like large funds, even if you look at like BDCs and stuff like that, right, which are effectively sort of like publicly traded like yield generation vehicles. These have reports that only come out quarterly, right? So that cycle is just slow. And therefore, it makes it a little bit more difficult to have a liquid yield-bearing asset, unless you have a huge amount of trust in the company that is doing it, right? Which is why a lot of the guys who you see in the public markets who are doing stuff like this are big names like Goldman or BlackRock or Blackstone or something like this, right? Like massive companies with like decades, if not centuries, of history. But fundamentally, you're trusting them, right? And as you know, we've seen time and time again in 2008 and previous sort of economic market crashes, that trust isn't always justified, right?
Yeah.
So what's really important for us at Noon, and leading into the V-Layer partnership perfectly, is how do we make sure that people, I mean, I hope they will trust us, but you don't have to trust us in order to use us, right? You can see verifiably that, no, don't believe the numbers that we should give you, because yeah, we could be pulling these numbers out of thin air. Instead, let us give you a computationally secure, trustless way of proving that we are doing what we claim to be doing, right? And I think that's where, again, obviously we've had a couple of different solutions in place, and that's where I think the solution with V-Layer using zkTLS is incredibly powerful, because we can get, with V-Layer's help, data directly from the source, right? So where we are actually custodying the assets, generating those returns, go directly to the users, or at least the visible form on the web that users can access. So there's no need to trust our numbers, no need to trust our calculations or anything like that. It is literally going straight from the source directly to the user. So you can see, are we doing what we claim to be doing?
Right. And it's, to be able to verify data, and I know some of those that are watching, zkTLS, or what we call web proofs, is a very hot trending topic right now. It's a great technology, and how the usage of that between Noon and V-Layer, it's quite fascinating. But I want to emphasize something here it's not just verifying the data. So we can, if you don't trust us, that's great. You don't need to trust us. You can trust the numbers, trust this objectively. Tell us a bit more about what it means when we say you can essentially verify the data in real time. I want to underline and emphasize the real time category of that.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly, I think, the difference, right? That trust is often time bound, right? So, if I give someone else money, I might trust them for a month, a year, 3 years, but there's some time-bound limitation to that, right? So for example, a lot of publicly traded companies, you have to trust them essentially for 3-month periods until sort of their returns come out. And then you kind of say, okay, cool, let me verify that they've been doing what I think they've been doing. And this is why you have sort of so much emphasis on earning reports and stuff like that, right? The fact that this is live, I think, is unique to crypto and Web3. And that's why this is such an interesting use case that I think will change how the world looks at financial services, right? Because the moment you are able to have real-time verification that you are doing what you say you are doing, and you have real-time liquidity, they can pull funds on and off using sort of atomic transactions and things like that, both of which are now possible on the blockchain. Then suddenly you have a world in which kind of this real negative world in the financial services space, rehypothecation, goes from a negative, dirty word to a really powerful tool in every human being's arsenal, right? Where I can rehypothecate a yield-bearing asset as many different ways as I'd like to, as long as I have that real yield view, or a real return view, or some real view of what's happening with my assets, and I can have liquidity quickly, right, or instantly. And those two things, I think, are going to be game changers as we look at this sort of yield-bearing stablecoin sort of dynamic, as pushing sort of towards becoming the reserve currency of the world. Now, again, I say that with a pinch of salt. Obviously, I think this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take years, if not decades, to kind of even get close to that ambition, because there's lots of like vested interests, including very powerful like nation states, who don't necessarily like that to happen, or a lot of them sort of don't necessarily want that to happen. But again, having something like this will be really powerful, not least because of that real-time nature.
Yeah, you bring a kind of it's a sore subject for many, but when we talk about nation state, the government, I mean, they honestly, the education or the lack thereof from what they understand this to be is next to none. It's a bit challenging and frustrating, especially for projects like nUN or even like us, like a vLayer. You're having to kind of defy the odds of like what we are and what we aren't. And I think there's a lot of presuppositions that are made from those institutions and those higher levels within government agencies, that they'll sign these bills and pass these kind of initiatives. And it just seems like, are you not getting the reality of the state in which the world is in? And not to go down a rabbit hole there, but you bring up a very good point. I mean, it is such an important thing to recognize that this has to be something we got to look at for the future, not just from a financial economic standpoint. We're talking about our families and people in the world that are limited and hindered by the US dollar. The fiat currency, as we all know, is very much in a declining, manner, given that how it's been kind of trending in the past few years. And I think it just goes to show education is just as important as kind of getting the technology built. And I kind of want to lead into kind of finally, when we talk about user adoption, that might be the most challenging thing for Web3. I've seen this a lot, whether you're building toolkits, for developers, developer adoption acquisition could be quite the challenge. We also talk about end user acquisition. Talk to me about what does the user experience look like when they interact with nUN? A little bit about the transparency that they might see, and maybe even walk if somebody were interested. Like, okay, how would I participate with nUN? What does that look like?
Yeah, we're trying to make nUN. So we're trying to make nUN as easy for people to use today. But we also understand that may not be the way people use nUN going forward, right? So let me talk about each of those. So today, you can literally go on the nUN app, connect your wallet. So nUN app is app.nUN.capital. You can literally go on it, go to the buy page, and we have all of the backend functionality that you need done sort of behind the scenes. So you don't have to worry about anything. All you do is connect your wallet, say how much you want to buy, and that just allows you to buy USN, which is our pegged token, which gives you a lot of nUN rewards. But if you just want the yield, then you go and buy SUSN, which is our stake stablecoin. And the moment you have that in your wallet, that just appreciates on a daily basis. So there's nothing else you need to do. No other claiming, no other, trying to get the yield back into your wallet. Just holding SUSN on a daily basis will get you that yield incrementally every single day. It'll also get you some points, nUN points for our airdrop that's coming up, and obviously holding USN will similarly get you those nUN points. Now, I think you mentioned a really interesting point where I think vLayer and one of our other partners, Accountables, has done a great job at helping us out. Again, we wanted to make sure that what we're talking about today, right, using proofs, algorithmic proofs to show that you don't have to believe us. What we're doing is actually what is actually reality. Is visible to every user as well, right? So if you go again to our website and go to our solvency page, the combination with you guys, vLayer, as well as Accountable, have built a solvency page that basically shows that our assets are where we say they are. They're doing what we say we're doing. We're always over collateralized. So you have a full long-term view of exactly what is the sort of the reality, the state of the ground, which is again done by a third party looking directly at our actual custodial wallet data. So not having anything to do with the data that we share or anything like that. So we try to make it as easy for users as possible to interact with the protocol, generate returns, see exactly what's happening. And the last thing I'll say is we have an entire menu of, if you'd like to use USN or SUSN composably across DeFi, there's an entire menu of options that will give you further rewards, both in terms of yield, also in terms of points, etc., in our rewards page. So all of that, we've sort of created a one-stop shop on the app, which allows you to do whatever you want.
That's incredible. I mean, what you're doing is you're giving so many good options, and I'm excited for like the user testimonials, right? They're the ones that really kind of help that adoption carry on. It's the voices of them and their interactions with something, an app like this, that really kind of generates this interest about what you're doing. And it's probably one of the best marketing ways we can get, right? Is let the customers, let the users kind of do the talking. And if you make it too complex, they're going to also tell you how difficult it is, and then you're going to see the drop in numbers. And it's nothing what we want. Arpan, this has been amazing, my friend. I really appreciate this conversation. For those that are watching, and whether watching or listening, how can they get started? I know you mentioned a couple of different ways in which they can kind of look into you, but what would you suggest? And we'll put it in the links below after the show, but tell us kind of where they can get started.
Yeah, I'd say just head over to our app.noon.capital. Take a look. If you like what you see, feel free to engage and sort of join in, start earning yield. I definitely always recommend people get to know us a little bit. So docs.noon.capital has all of the sort of the underlying docs behind what we're doing, what our strategies are, etc. And then obviously our solvency page, noon.accountable.capital, has all of our metrics in terms of historics, so you can see exactly where our funds are being put to use.
That's awesome. And yeah, stay tuned for more exciting updates about the relationship, what we're doing with Noon and with Accountable. Thank you for shouting them out. I think it's been a great initiative. What we're trying to accomplish is important. It's very, very important if we want to actually see the needle moved and see that true adoption that we all join this space to see. So again, thanks again, Arpan. Enjoy the rest of your day, my friend. And for those that are watching, again, stay tuned. We're excited to give you updates in the near future, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me on, Scott. Have a great day. Bye.
You too.